So today we're going to continue talking about the blessing. Bonnie on Sunday talked about you got to know you're blessed. And then last night we continued talking about how when you live in the blessing, it's beyond just natural blessing where God can reign on the just and the unjust, where everybody has a level of blessing that they walk in just naturally. But in the supernatural, there's something where you can supersede natural laws and in some sense contradict natural laws because you're living by a higher standard, you're living by a higher reality. And we mentioned where Isaac was able to sow in famine and reap 100-fold. Naturally speaking, and what the whole market dictated, that everyone was not able to produce in that time. Yet by the blessing, he was able to produce. That contradicted natural laws. And everyone says, God will never contradict nature. God will never contradict nature. He won't contradict things that he created, but he will supersede nature by laws that supersede the natural. How can a virgin produce a child? Well, that is supernatural. It goes beyond what we're able to do just in the natural. So I want to talk about the blessing from the beginning. The first time we see the word blessed is in Genesis 1. I think it's around 22, verse 22, where it talks about God blessing seed and blessing fish and blessing animals. But where we see what the blessing is in Genesis 1, verse 28, where God made mankind, he created man, let us create them in our image. And God blessed them, and he said to them, be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth, and subdue it. And then he says, rule over the fish in the sea, and some other good things. So there are levels in the blessing that allow us to supersede whatever is available to everyone. Every human is allowed to operate in a level of natural blessing. God created the earth, and so there's a natural blessing that's available. But when Adam and Eve sinned, the earth realm was corrupted. They introduced another authority, the little g god of this world, who came in and corrupted mankind, corrupted them by trying to go after a knowledge, or the fruit of the knowledge of the good and evil. And so the world can live by a measure of blessing, but the church or the believer is meant to live in a supernatural blessing that makes the world jealous and makes the world go, how is it that they're able to produce 100-fold in a famine? So the blessing simply means multiplication. It's a mathematical operation. The blessing means to take something and multiply it by a certain factor, 30, 60, 90. I like 100-fold. That's a good number to multiply by. But there's levels in this blessing. And so when God blessed man, remember that the earth was blessed. He blessed everything he created. He said it was good. He told everything to multiply. Everything must be blessed. And then he blessed man within a blessed system. So that's not just simply a multiplication. That is multiplication upon multiplication. The only way to get away from hard work that tries to earn the blessing, is to be in a blessed system. There's levels to the blessing. You can operate in a system that there's a measure of blessing where you have to work hard and you have to sweat and you have to learn and you have to grow and you have to stretch. Those are all wonderful, good things. But then you get to a level in the supernatural where that happens at a compounded rate, where you're not working by the sweat of your own brow, by the knowledge of good and evil. You are now working by a reality that can get you water to wine in an instant. And so the first quality of the blessing that I want to focus on is where God said, I want you to be fruitful. If you are going to operate in the blessing, there's a level of fruitfulness that your eyes have to be open to. Just like their eyes in a negative sense were opened to the fact that they were naked. If you're going to walk in a supernatural blessing, it needs to be the reverse of that. You need to understand that he has covered you, that in Christ there's a covenant that he earned and he deserved the blessing that we inherit. We don't earn and deserve it. We don't have to work hard for it, that he gave to us. So in a sense, our eyes become closed to what Adam and Eve's eyes became open to. And our eyes become open to what is available in heaven. You have to understand that you can be fruitful. One of the biggest, most corrupt ideas in any system, any religious system, even in the church, is the fact that you need to be poor, or that you need to be sick, or that you need to be oppressed. You need to be the victim. You need to be the martyr. When you understand that God's very first intention for mankind was to to bless you, for you to be fruitful. For a lot of people under religious thinking, that's an incredibly freeing notion. And most people fall at the first hurdle of understanding that you need to be fruitful. When you want to go into blessing, supernatural blessing, you need to understand that God designed you to be fruitful. Everything in nature is designed to be fruitful. The very fact that flowers exist is because they want to be fruitful. Without a flower, there is no pollination, there's no cross-pollination, there's no fruit, there's no produce, and then there's no reproduction. So you need to understand that God has designed you to be fruitful. Many people who come into a grace understanding, not many, but some people who come into a grace understanding, they forget that you need to be fruitful. They forget that there's something to be fulfilled in life. And so they lose a sense of purpose. They lose a sense of what God has placed in them, and they become apathetic, they become passive, they become boring, and eventually they just walk away from Jesus because they're not feeling fulfilled, and they go and do earthly things. They substitute what God made available to them for just earthly, boring things. You got to understand that even in Christ, there's an opportunity to be fruitful. So there's levels to this game. The first level of the blessing is that God said you need to be fruitful. The second level, he says, I want you to increase. So there is not just a fruitfulness like a one-hit wonder where one day you were able to produce by the blessing. One day you saw a miracle, or one day you saw a healing, or one day you get the pay rise. It's that there's an increasing component, there's an increasing nature to your fruitfulness. So one day you may be able to get 3 runs on the board, but the next time you have a go and you learn and you stretch and you inherit the blessing that God won for you, maybe you get 5 runs on the board. Maybe you get 7. Maybe you take a risk because you're not afraid of failing because you know God's blessed you anyway, and you get 100 runs on the board. So there is an increasing nature to the blessing. It is not stagnant. It's not you get there and then you settle. You get there and then there's another horizon and you get to that next horizon. And by the time you're 80, you haven't settled. You haven't got bored. You haven't give up. You keep on growing in the blessing. I do not like old people. But it's not old people in terms of their age, it's old people in terms of their heart. If you're 18 and you're going, I don't care, I'm not going to try, then you're an old person. But if you're 80 and you're still going for it and you're still learning and you're still pushing and you're still trying to see an increased blessing and increased miracles, then I love that. I think there's got to be a fruitfulness and then an increasing nature to that fruitfulness. The third component, remember, there's levels to the blessing. The third component is to fill the earth. This is a global mandate. This is something beyond you and your little world, you and your little finance or your bank account or your little family. There's an increasing nature where God said to Abraham, I'm going to bless you, and through you, you will bless all nations or all families on the earth. And so whenever God brings blessing, he's not bringing blessing just to you. He's bringing a flow of multiplication and increase and fruitfulness so that you can fill the earth. If you do not have a global agenda, then you've got to ask yourself, am I living in the blessing, or am I living in some sort of selfishness that looks a little like the blessing but has a corrupt nature? God's purpose for Jesus wasn't to come and bless the Jews. It was to bless the Jews and all nations. Religion says, no, the blessing's just coming to me, or this special lucky thing is coming to just me, and then no one else has access, or you got to pay for access. No, Jesus kicked over the tables when the Jews were trying to capitalize and monetize the house of God. And he said, no, my Father's house will be a house of prayer for all nations. He was opening the gate. He wasn't closing the gate. And so there is a component to the blessing that says, I want to bless not just myself, not just my family. Yes, charity starts at home. And you've got to learn to operate, to be fruitful and increase in the blessing. But then it's got to flow through you to others. So the third component of the blessing is that it's got to fill the earth. And the last component is that God said to mankind, I want you to be fruitful. I want you to increase. I want you to multiply. And then he said, I want you to have dominion. I want you to rule. The purpose of man on the planet from the very conception was that man had dominion. There's a big movement on the earth today to give away control, to give away power to any person who has any authority. Legitimate authority is now evil. That's nonsense. God wanted to give mankind authority over the planet. The problem was man gave that authority away to the wrong people. So if you have a mindset that, oh no, I can't go into the blessing, I can't be increased by God, no, I can't earn more, I can't have a miracle because I'm worried that I will be corrupt when I get the power, you leave the door open for corrupt people to take power. You need to have dominion in the blessing. Do not be afraid to have zeros at the end of your bank account. That's the biggest thing that'll stop people who start to move in the blessing, is that they get afraid of others who criticize them for when they start to increase. Remember, there's levels to the game, and most people, including myself, we don't get beyond the first entry level because we're afraid of what others say. When you start to operate in the blessing, people will look at you and say, well, why aren't you stressed out when everyone else is stressed out? Why are you earning more money in the corona? Who are you diddling? Who are you fiddling? Who are you stealing from? No, the more money you earn during this time, the more blessing you have for others. Remember, the third level was a global mandate. It was to bless people through the blessing that you inherit. And so there's an authority, there's a dominion, there's a rulership that comes in the blessing, and God will give that to those who have been faithful with the lower three levels. When they've understood by revelation, I am blessed. Oh, God designed me to be fruitful. They understand that this is not just a stagnant blessing, a one-off lucky lottery, that it's something that increases and you grow as you partner with God more and more. And the third level, as you bless others, then He will give you authority and He will give you influence, and He will, more than an Instagram influencer or a YouTube influencer, He'll give you influence into whole nations and then give you rulership. And I tell you now, there is such a movement against godly authority on the planet, and yet that's the very thing people need. There are atheists saying, I don't believe in God, but man, this particular geographical area or this nation, they need some notion of God. I don't believe God exists, but I can see there's something lacking. If an atheist is saying that the nations need God, then you got to know they really do need God. We as Christians should be shouting from the rooftops, yeah, we have the solution. The solution is the blessing. Remember, there are levels to the game. Don't camp at pit stop 1 or pit stop 2. Don't get to base camp and think you've climbed the mountain. There are horizons and possibilities that are available to us in the blessing. I want to say that Esau was a hunter. He was able to go and bring food in. Why was he hungry? Why was he so hungry? And yet Jacob stayed at home. He was a mommy's boy, literally a mommy's boy. That's who he loved. And he was the one who had the food ready when the moment was ripe. Why wasn't Esau having the food ready? It's because he's operating by natural blessing. He married local women, local ideas, local theologies. He didn't go after and hunger after the blessing. Everything about Jacob was the blessing, the blessing, the blessing. And on paper, I would vote for Esau, because he's the strong man, he's the hunter, he's the leader, and yet he's not the one by which the promise, the lineage of the promise, blessed the nations. It was through Jacob, who was later called Israel. So we've got to understand that it's not about just natural means. There are supernatural means that you and I can grow and develop in that influence the nations, not just us, but influence the nations. But I want to say, it starts with you. You need to take responsibility. You need to take responsibility of your thoughts. You need to take responsibility of your mindsets. You need to take responsibility for your theology. Stop waiting for your pastor or your mother or your children to tell you how to think. You need to say, like Jacob, I'm hungry for the blessing. He was so naughty. He stole the blessing and he stole the birthright, and he wouldn't let go of the angel because he wanted the blessing so much. You got to have that same passion, that same hunger. You got to break some rules sometimes. You can't make an omelet unless you break a few eggs. There's got to be something in you that is hungry for the blessing. Stop settling for what's available to everybody. It's available already. You don't have to reach, you don't have to stretch, you don't have to sacrifice, you don't have to take a risk to have the same rain that gets on the unjust as the just. I want to tell you there's something in the supernatural that you've got to reach for. I want to tell you during this pandemic, I have never been so profitable. I've never had so much money in my bank account. I've never had so much opportunity. It is not by natural means that we have had that flow of blessing. It is by supernatural means. We have been positioned for years where I followed the voice of God to not shut down things that I wanted to shut down in the natural. I had to contradict what was happening in the natural, what the logical accounting choice was, what the business choice was. I had to contradict that because I was operating by a different economy. And now I'm positioned for blessing to flow when others they don't have a trickle. It's a famine. And I don't want to gloat, and I'm not gloating, but I want to say that that money in my pocket is going to be put to good use. It's going to bless others. It's going to keep things afloat, like Noah in his ship. Where others were drowning, he was able to save his whole family. And because he saved his family, he saved the whole earth. You see the knock-on effect? When you take responsibility yourself for your own mindsets and your own thought patterns and your own heart and your own limitations on what God has given you freely, but you can limit God, then there's a knock-on effect to your family and to your local vicinity and to your church and then to the nations. I want to say that not everybody reaches all the levels of the blessing. I don't think there's a human on the planet that has reached the maximum depths of what's available in the blessing. But I do think we have an opportunity in this time to reach in. I'm not talking about money coming in, into your bank account and zeros disappearing, although that could happen. I'm talking about godly, strategic opportunities that He gives you. You just get an unction, you get a feeling, you get a perception where you follow that, and you're just blessed. Something just happens. Someone just says, you know what, I've got the contact, or I've got the business, or you know what, I had that dream yesterday. Let me confirm that word. And then your faith is inspired in that moment to get the miracle. There is something supernatural available, and it's available right now. Go and read Genesis 1. It is so encouraging. Go and read Genesis 12. And then go and read that guy, I think his name's Jesus. He just walked in blessing, miracle after miracle after miracle. They try to criticize him for operating in the blessing. Oh, John, he's fasting and you're not fasting. You're just eating and you're having a feast. He says, no, whilst I'm here, have a party. I want to tell you that Jesus is with us every single moment. It is a party. In the middle of the famine, it's a party. I encourage you, go and take a double portion. If someone's trying to be frugal with their Diet Coke, go and have 2 glasses of Coke. If someone's saying, no, don't, just order enough, go and order twice as much as you need and then give something to the homeless. Go and live as if you're blessed, because I promise you, you are. I'm not saying being irresponsible. I'm saying the exact opposite. I'm saying be responsible for your thoughts, for your mind, for your emotions, for your heart, and live in this blessing.